On November 17th, 2024, paramedics responded to a 119 call from an apartment in Paju, Gyeonggi Province. The caller was a husband reporting that his wife was conscious but fading. And what they found inside was haunting. A 37-year-old woman, married for a decade, living with her husband in what neighbors assumed was a normal home. But behind closed doors, something unspeakable had been happening for months. This is the story of Yusana, how she lived, how she suffered, and the questions that remain about the man who was supposed to protect her. Let's begin. Before we get into today's story, I want to talk about a very real risk that a lot of travelers underestimate: buying SIM cards from unauthorized sellers. This usually happens outside airports or train stations. You're tired, you need data, and someone offers to help. But that's exactly where problems start. Letting someone help you install a SIM means handing over your phone. Using resellers outside official stores means there's often no accountability if something goes wrong. And constantly swapping SIM cards between countries increases the risk of scams, data issues, or losing control of your number. A SIM might not even work at all, or worse, it works just long enough for you to think everything is fine. And that is why I never buy physical SIM cards when I travel anymore. I always use Saily, which is an eSIM, a digital SIM card you install directly on your phone. There is no physical SIM to swap, no handing your phone to anyone, and no dealing with random sellers. I just download the Saily app, select my destination, choose a data plan, and enter my code Darkasiawithmegan for 15% off, all before boarding. When I land, my data is already active. No troubleshooting, no arguing, no guessing whether the SIM will work. For me, using Saily is really about peace of mind. Once it's installed, you don't need to install a new eSIM for every country. They offer affordable plans in over 200 destinations, including regional and global plans. They also offer 24/7 chat support and a full refund if your device isn't eSIM compatible. You can get 15% off a Saily data plan with my code Darkasiawithmegan. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/Darkasiawithmegan. The link is at the top of the description and pinned in the comments, so if you have any travel plans, go check it out. One of the paramedics who responded to the call is still able to describe that day vividly. From the moment he opened the front door, he recoiled. An unbearable stench filled the entire house. It was the unmistakable smell of feces. Even in the entryway, it was bad enough that he had to cover his nose. He entered the main bedroom, but he couldn't see anyone. So the paramedics asked, "Where is she?" Kim Dong-hun, the victim's husband and the one who made the call, pointed. At first glance, it looked like an empty recliner. Looking closer, they could see a person completely covered up to their neck with a blanket. The blanket had turned black, completely stained with feces. When he lifted the blanket, the paramedic couldn't believe his eyes. It was a woman in her 30s, wearing only a thin tank top. Her entire body was covered in feces and maggots. Some of the maggots had already become flies and were buzzing around the room. Not only this, but her skin was rotting. Fluid was oozing out of her wounds, turning the floor beneath the recliner completely black. Even as the paramedic stood there, she was losing control of her bowels. She no longer had any control over her own body. Beside her was a phone resting on a phone stand. On the screen, an old TV show from the early 2000s was playing. She was looking up at the screen, breathing shallowly. She was barely clinging to life. The paramedic later said, "In all my years, I'd never seen rotting skin like this on someone who was still alive." Sona went to cardiac arrest during transport and received emergency treatment. But on November 18th, the next day, at around 10 a.m., she passed away. The cause of death was sepsis. Test results showed she had 7 liters of fluid in her abdomen. She had lost 30 kilograms. Her bed sores had progressed beyond stage 4, the most severe classification. But the medical findings revealed something even more disturbing. A chest CT scan showed multiple rib fractures from the 1st to the 6th rib on her right side. Medical experts confirmed these weren't from CPR. The 1st rib is particularly thick and rarely fractures from chest compressions. This pointed to an external force and a possible assault. There was more. The necrosis on her shoulders and abdomen appeared to be caused by something other than bed sores. The shoulder wound, in particular, was the most recent injury, and doctors suspected it was caused by a stab wound. Experts determined that for her condition to deteriorate this far, she must have been neglected for at least 3 months, possibly longer. The hospital immediately reported the case to the police. They suspected neglect and possibly something worse. But what was especially strange was Dong-hoon's reaction. When the attending physician showed the family photos to explain Sana's condition, Dong-hoon, who had been living with her, collapsed as if he had seen her pain for the first time. I didn't know my wife was this bad, he said. Did he really not know? They lived together in the same house. In that house, the stench was overwhelming for someone just standing at the front door. A smell that even trained paramedics found hard to bear. Was it even possible for Kim Dong-hoon to know nothing? Yusana, a pseudonym to protect the victim's identity, had been married for 10 years at the time of her death. Her husband, Kim Dong-hoon, was an army sergeant, serving as a transportation officer for the 2nd Armored Brigade, the 16th Tank Battalion in Gwangtanmyeon Township, in the rural area of Paju. At the time of his arrest, he was in job transition training, preparing to leave the military. Sana and Dong-hoon had been elementary school classmates, later becoming a couple and then marrying in 2016. Those who knew Sana remembered her as lively, healthy, and kind to everyone. A thoughtful daughter who always worried about her mother before herself. A caring younger sister who never forgot her older sister's birthday. Everyone who knew her was shocked. How could someone so kind end up like this? The official narrative from Dong-hoon is that she had developed depression. One close friend was suspicious. She recalled that when she herself was struggling with depression, Sana had been there to support and encourage her. If Sana had truly been depressed, the friend said, she would certainly have reached out. To understand what happened to Sana, we need to learn more about her marriage. After they married, Sana moved to Paju to be with Kim Dong-hoon. She left her hometown and friends behind to start fresh in an unfamiliar place. They had no children, but they did have 2 dogs that they cherished like children. By all accounts, the couple had a simple but happy life together. During the Lunar New Year holiday in early 2024, the whole family went on a 2-day trip together, and it was Sona's idea. In the photos, she can be seen smiling brightly. She looked healthy and fine. The following fall, during Chuseok, Korean Thanksgiving, was the last time her family saw her in person. Until spring of 2024, the couple seemed normal. They looked forward to evenings together, chatting about what to have for dinner. Even when Sana mentioned something casually, Dong-hoon would surprise her with a gift. But something had happened in 2023 that increased her dependence on her husband. Sana quit her job. Dong-hoon later claimed his wife had trouble with a coworker at her former workplace, and that's when she became depressed. But when investigators examined messages Sana had exchanged with friends around the time she quit, there were no signs of depression. She seemed perfectly normal. Not long after she quit, Dong-hoon contacted her family, saying, "Mother, Sana has developed a panic disorder." Her mother was shocked and called her daughter directly. Sana seemed to confirm what Dong-hoon had said. "Mom, I've developed panic disorder. Meeting people is so hard for me. I'll come visit when I get better." Even if you miss me, please be patient for a little while. But something was off. When investigators later checked Sona's hospital records, there was no record of her ever being diagnosed with a panic disorder or depression anywhere. It wasn't a medical diagnosis, it was only Dong-hoon's opinion. From that point on, Sona gradually pulled away from family and friends. In Paju, she didn't belong to any social groups. She had only one person she ever saw. And after a car accident she'd had years earlier, she was too scared to drive. In this unfamiliar city, the only person she could rely on was her husband. According to those who knew them, Sona had originally been the one in control. She was active, confident, and outgoing. Dong-hoon, by contrast, was quiet and would do anything his wife asked. But criminal psychologists who analyzed the case believe that at some point, the power dynamic completely reversed. Two factors likely drove this shift: economic issues and psychological problems that developed in Sona. When she quit her job in 2023, she became financially dependent on Dong-hoon. Whether or not she was really suffering mental health problems, the balance of power had shifted entirely to him. This is just speculation, but once this reversal happened, it's possible that Dong-hoon may have started showing a completely different side of himself. What began as emotional control could have escalated into verbal abuse, and eventually into physical violence. Acquaintances testified that while the couple seemed close on the surface, Kim Do-eun's drinking frequently led to fights. He was normally quiet, but when he drank, he sometimes became uncontrollable and violent. After his military promotion, Kim Dong-hoon had more social obligations outside home. Sona was left alone for longer periods and more often. The diaries Sona kept revealed the extent of her psychological dependence. She wrote about wanting to be a good wife, preparing to become a good parent, and expressed deep love for her husband. She also wrote that she didn't like being home when he wasn't there. These entries painted a picture of a one-sided relationship, one where Sona had become completely psychologically dependent on Dong-hoon. Psychologists who reviewed the case suggested that Sona may have been trapped in a state of psychological gaslighting. She may have believed that the only person who could solve her problems was her husband, even though he was the one causing them. Whether through physical restraint or psychological manipulation, she was being controlled. One psychology professor pointed out that even if Sona had experienced depression or panic attacks, having a panic disorder doesn't make someone physically unable to move. Whatever was keeping her trapped in that chair, it wasn't her own choice. Sona's family wanted to see her, but they couldn't because Dong-hoon prevented them. Her panic disorder is so severe that she has attacks and collapses when she meets people. You shouldn't come, he told his in-laws. He said he was taking good care of Sona and told them not to worry, and the family believed him. They trusted their son-in-law. And there was reason to trust him. From their newlywed days through their entire marriage, Dong-hoon had consistently sent messages that appeared to show how well he was caring for his wife. This wasn't a habit he started when Sona started to withdraw from her family. So it wasn't something to trigger alarm bells. It was just a habit of his. That's why no one could have predicted what was really happening. Criminal psychologists noted that Dong-hoon showed complete indifference to his wife's suffering. Yet, at the same time, he consistently projected the image of an ideal, caring husband to the outside world. This wasn't accidental, it was a deliberate performance, but something very different was happening inside the house. After the incident, investigators searched the home and found 2 letters on Dong-hoon's desk. They were handwritten by Sona to her husband. "You must be having such a hard time because of me, right? I'm sorry," one read. The letter mentioned his bringing up separation. Sona had written multiple apologies, saying she was scared and afraid. And there was this sentence, "Please take me to the hospital. Can I ask you this favor? I want to get some cold medicine and lip balm. She was begging to be taken to the hospital. If it were just a cold, she could have gone herself, but she was clearly in a state where she couldn't move on her own. Profilers who examined the case suggested that the panic disorder and depression that Dong-un claimed his wife had may have been conditions he manufactured through gaslighting. In reality, she may have been unable to move for entirely different reasons. There was a strong chance he had physically restrained her to that chair. By March 2024, warning signs were already appearing on Sana's body. Delivery records showed that was when she started steadily ordering gauze and bandages. She had wounds, and those wounds were getting worse. So did Dong-un ever take his sick wife to the hospital? The family checked her medical records through the National Health Insurance Service. June 1st, 2024 was the last hospital visit on record. After that, she only saw the inside of a hospital in the hours before she died. For 5 months. For 5 months, while her body was rotting away, Dong-un did nothing to get his wife medical care. But here's another strange detail. He did take the dogs to the vet. Receipts were found for September and October. He also took them for grooming on a regular basis. He even proudly sent photos of them to her family. He took such good care of the dogs, so why not his wife? While his family thought everything was fine, neighbors started to notice evidence to the contrary. Dong-un was frequently seen entering the house carrying plastic bottles of soju, and loud noises could be heard through the walls until 2 a.m. almost every night. Another neighbor said, "I never once saw the women who lived there. I assumed they had divorced." Sana was cut off from the world, trapped inside that house. 3 months. For 3 full months, he knew maggots were crawling over his wife's body, and he didn't call 119, Korea's emergency number. The paramedics asked, "Why didn't you report it?" "I thought my wife would overcome it on her own," he said. The paramedic pressed him. "So for 3 months, you just left her in this condition and did nothing?" Dong-un didn't answer. Later, Dong-un changed his story. He claimed he'd never told the paramedic that she'd been like that for 3 months. But the paramedic's testimony was clear. I asked him multiple times, and he said that starting 3 months ago, necrosis began and maggots started appearing. Legal experts said that Dong-un's denial was predictable to escape criminal liability, claiming ignorance was his best defense. But the medical evidence would make that defense hard to maintain. Forensic analysis could determine when the necrosis began, and combined with the paramedic's testimony about what Dong-un had said on the scene, it would serve as powerful evidence against him. Investigators also discovered something that contradicted his claims of ignorance. During the period when Sana was dying, the household's water usage skyrocketed to over 40 tons per month. A typical one-person household uses about 10 tons. Even a 4-person family uses only 18 to 20 tons. For a 2-person household to use 40 tons is simply impossible under normal circumstances. Experts believed he may have left the water running all day, possibly to wash away evidence or mask the smell. Electricity bills also spiked abnormally during the same period. Analysts believed he may have been running the air conditioner around the clock to mask the smell of decay. When asked why he hadn't noticed the smell coming from his wife's room, Kim Do-won claimed he used a fabric deodorizer and incense sticks, so he didn't notice. Despite his claims, the evidence pointed to one conclusion. Dong-un knew exactly what was happening, and he was actively trying to hide it. During that period, Dong-un kept contacting his in-laws, saying he was taking good care of his wife. 11 days before the 119 call, Kim Do-won sent a message to his mother-in-law, saying, "Sana ate samgyeopsal and cabbage doenjang soup today." The mother-in-law was relieved, believing that even if her mental health was not at its best, at least her daughter was eating well. While Dong-un was sending these messages, he was allowing his wife to, quite literally, rot away on the recliner. On November 16th, the day before the 119 call, Dong-un posted a photo in the family group chat. He sent a photo showing that he had cleaned the bathroom. He also reported that he had fed his wife soup. One detail about this came out later. Dong-un said that while feeding her soup that day, his wife spilled it on the blanket. When he tried to change the blanket, he saw his wife's feet. They were completely black, he said. If he saw her feet had turned black, why did he only call for help then? Criminal analysts believed that Dong-un, as a soldier, understood better than most what would happen once responsibility fell on him. From the moment his wife's condition became severe, he knew it couldn't be revealed to the outside world. There was a strong chance he carefully calculated the timing of the 119 call. Other experts theorized that through neglect, Dong-un essentially created the circumstances for his wife to die. If he had killed her in any immediate way, it would be murder. By simply leaving her to deteriorate, he could distance himself from the outcome. Sana had a smartphone right beside her. She could have called anyone, her family, her friends, emergency services, but she didn't. Why? Legal and psychological experts suggested 3 possible reasons. First, physical inability. Sana simply couldn't move. Her body had deteriorated to the extent that she had no control over her limbs. The multiple rib fractures meant she may have been physically prevented from reaching for help. Second, psychological domination. The letters and diary entries revealed that Sana was completely dependent on her husband. Even while being subjected to horrific abuse, neglect, and abandonment, she likely felt guilty about being a burden to him. She may not have had the will to call for help at all. In her mind, her husband was still the only person who could save her, even if he was really the one responsible for her suffering. Third, complete isolation. Dong-un deliberately lied to cut off all contact between Sana and the outside world. With her poor health, her psychological dependence on him, and his active blocking of communication with family and friends, she had no other options. Others suspected something more sinister, that she physically couldn't call for help because she was restrained in that chair, unable to move. The multiple rib fractures, the suspected stab wound, the complete isolation from family and friends, the husband who drank heavily and turned violent. As investigators dug deeper, another disturbing theory emerged. Criminal profiler Bae Sang-hoon, discussing this case on the radio, stated flatly that Dong-un's claim of ignorance was a complete lie. Looking at her state when she was found, her lower body paralyzed, flesh rotting away from necrosis, there was no way the husband didn't know. But Bae went further. He suggested this might not be simple neglect at all. He raised the possibility that this was what criminologists call a lust murder, a sadistic killing where the perpetrator derives pleasure from the victim's suffering. When you look at the scene objectively, maggots visibly moving, decomposition fluid dripping, claiming not to notice is nothing but an excuse. Bae suspected that Dong-un may have been engaging in a form of sadistic abuse, essentially trapping his wife in a dying body and watching her suffer. He pointed to the inexplicable water usage, 40 tons in a single month, as evidence that Dong-un did something, and whatever that something was, it led to his wife's death. When he could no longer hide the situation, he finally called 119. Bae also offered a chilling explanation for why Kim Dong-un called emergency services while his wife was still alive. If she had been found dead inside the house, it would immediately be treated as a murder case. But if she was still barely breathing when paramedics took her to the hospital, under Korean investigative practices, it would more likely be classified as abandonment, resulting in death, a lesser charge. It's entirely possible that Dong-hoon had calculated this precisely. The profiler emphasized that without proper psychological testing and profiling of the suspect, the trial would likely end with a verdict of simple abandonment or domestic murder through neglect. But there was clearly abuse here, he said. If investigators didn't uncover it, the bereaved family would never see justice. The question of what truly happened in that apartment may never be fully answered. On December 15, 2024, military prosecutors indicted Dong-hoon on murder charges. The primary charge was murder. If that charge didn't stick, abandonment resulting in death was applied as a backup. Prosecutors determined that murder by omission, failing to act when legally obligated, could apply in this case. Dong-hoon could be held responsible for not seeking medical treatment for his dying wife. The trial will be held at the 2nd Regional Military Court. Legal experts noted that even if this were treated as simple abandonment resulting in death, it could carry at least 3 years in prison. But given the severity of this case, the body necrotizing, fluid oozing, maggots crawling, flesh rotted away to the point that she couldn't even feel pain, a sentence of 5 to 7 years, or even up to 10 years, is possible. But the mystery remains. What did Dong-hoon have to gain from this? What was his motive? These questions have yet to be answered, and we can only hope that they will be revealed at the trial. Seona's family still cannot forget that day. They question how much pain Seona must have been in when she was rotting away, with maggots crawling all over her. They have said it is heartbreaking just to think about. Her sister spoke through tears, asking, "How did my sister end up like this? She didn't cry out for help. She didn't say she was in pain. I keep wondering why she couldn't tell us the truth." The mother visits her daughter's grave every day. On Seona's birthday, she brought a cake made with all the things her daughter used to love. Her father couldn't even look at his daughter's photo. He held back his tears. The family has vowed to see this through to the end and do everything possible to discover the truth. If Seona had been found just a few days earlier, she could have been saved. Experts said so. There was a possibility of recovery, but she never called for help. No, she was unable to. We cannot know what Dong-hoon was thinking. But what we do know are that his actions were cruel, and his treatment of Seona was inhuman. We can only hope that the trial brings justice for Seona and her family. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.